My name is actually Mike Kaeding, and I'm president, thank you, Dan. I'm president of Norhart, and we build and manage apartments. You know, our passion is about creating a better way for people to live. That's what drives everything about our organization, and that includes our employees. You know, this probably doesn't need to be said with this group, but great employee engagement and creating the right company culture is pivotal to company success. So Gallup has shown many studies to show the improvement in profitability and success of an organization because of that employee culture. In fact, in one study, it showed 147% improvement just because of a good company culture. But the question here today is, how do we actually achieve that great company culture? And today I'm going to cover 4 major topics that dig into this. So the first one, and I think foundationally, it's about becoming the right kind of leader and finding the right kind of leaders for your organization. You know, our team, our leadership team, meets every year for a 2-day off-site meeting. And during that time, we invite an outside person to come facilitate that meeting for us. But during that meeting, all of our staff, our leadership team, gets a chance to talk about what we're strong and weak in. And I remember a few years ago, my team sat me down and said, Mike, we like you, but we need to talk about a few things. So you're so driven to reach a goal that you forget about the people beside you. And then furthermore, they dug in a little bit deeper and said, Mike, you don't even necessarily consult the people around you before taking on a big task. And for me, that was just a dagger to the heart. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but I needed to hear it because I needed to know the weaknesses I had so I could work to improve those as a leader. And all of us as leaders have these weaknesses that we need to be aware of and to work on. That's one piece to becoming a strong leader. You know, I love studying the people who are very best in the industry of whatever they do. And one of those people is Tom Brady. And he has a great little mini-series on Facebook. And it's called Tom versus Time. But during that series, he says, if you're going to compete against me, you better be willing to give up your life because I'm willing to give up mine. And here he's not talking about giving up your personal family life, but he is saying everything that you have professionally, be driven to complete some incredible goal. You need to be fully behind whatever you're trying to achieve. I've seen leaders who don't have this kind of heart behind their organization, and those leaders will never lead to build a fantastic organization. In fact, we've had staff come from companies like that where they're just fantastic staff doing a great job, but they have leaders who are not fully into what they're doing. And as a result, it's disheartening for the rest of the team. There's one truth that I love to say, and that is the speed of the leader is the speed of the team. People will only give 90% of what you are willing to give as a leader. So work hard and be driven in what you are doing. So there's this process we all go through as human beings and as leaders. We have issues within inside of us. And so the first stage is this level of ignorance. We don't even know about what those issues are. And then we might get some glimpse into what our issues are, and then we have a bit of fear. We don't want to, we're hoping people don't know that we have these insecurities, that we're not quite as perfect as we want to seem like we are to other people. And then there's a painful moment, and that is when the people around you know and understand that you have those weaknesses, and they tell you about it, like what happened to me a few years ago. But there's magic that happens in that moment because you can be vulnerable and open about those issues. And then weeks and months later, something truly magical happens. And that's when you realize that you're still being accepted for who you are despite those shortcomings. And you can almost laugh and joke about those shortcomings because you're engaging with the people around you and trying to improve those weaknesses that you have. So, leadership is critically important. If you don't have the right leaders, and if you are not the right kind of leader, it's going to be really challenging to create the kind of incredible company culture that you want to create. So you got to first focus on yourself. Then, we need to champion the right vision. I think it was Yogi Bear who said, if you don't know where you're going, you may not get there. You need to know where you're heading as an organization, and you need to be crystal clear about that vision. So early in my career, I had a chance to meet with a number of really talented executives of some large companies in Minnesota. And I was so excited for this, a little bit nervous. And he sat me down and said, Mike, can I ask you a question? I said, absolutely, ask away, I'm ready for this. He said, what is your purpose? I said, well, this is easy. We build and manage apartments. But he said, no, Mike, that's not your purpose. See, purpose answers the question of why. Why do you get up in the morning? Why are you excited about what you are doing? It took us a long time to realize this, but for us, it's all about creating a better way for people to live. And this frames our decision making. We have left millions of dollars on the table for certain decisions simply because it wasn't creating a better way for people to live. This drives us at our core. The next thing is mission. So mission answers the question of what? What do you do as an organization? And for us, that's simply building and managing quality apartments. Now, one of my favorite books is Good to Great by Jim Collins. And in that book, he talks about becoming best in the world at something. You want to drive to become best in the world at whatever it is that you do. But if you're going to do that, you need to have that scope as narrow as you possibly can, because you cannot be best in the world at everything. So for us, our scope is narrowed by the fact that we only focus on apartments. We don't do commercial, we don't do industrial, we don't do houses. We're just focused on building and managing quality apartments. The next one is values. So values describe who we are as people. And I've really come to understand the extreme importance of having well-defined values and making sure you're bringing on people that match those values. Now, studies show that what values you have don't matter as much as simply having those values, and then finding the people that match what those values are. So I'll just point out one of those values, and that's respect. See, we build and manage our apartments, so about half of our team is in construction. And at least in our neck of the woods, some of the construction companies in our area don't necessarily have a level of respect. But for us, this is really important to us, and we hold people to a very high standard, even on our construction sites, of having a very high level of respect. And what this does is it creates a company culture that's well defined, and we find people who have that level of respect, and we encourage people who don't to look for other jobs. So these three things, purpose, which is why, mission, which is what, and values is who, these three things do not change. They will very, very likely not change throughout my entire life. And the next two things that I'll talk about will change. The next one's strategies. And this is how we do what we do. This is how, when we get boots on the ground, how we actually create a better way for people to live. And I'll talk about one of those, and that's the smart apartments or technology. So we've been cited for having some of the smartest apartments in Minnesota and in the nation. And we have about 10% of our staff devoted to technology and software development, because we believe that's a key fundamental driver to creating a better way for people to live. But all of our strategies are in line with today's marketplace and with our purpose and mission. And lastly, our goals. So 10 years ago, we set together a 40-year goal. It's a little bit crazy, but I think it was important to have that in line to bring clarity to what we were trying to achieve. And so we've actually been right on track for the last 10 years with that goal plan. It's pretty magical what happens when you're clear about those goals and work hard to try to achieve them. But we have a 40-year goal plan, which then informs a written 10-year plan, which informs a 3-year plan, a 1-year plan, quarterly plans, and even weekly plans. But that helps bring a lot of clarity to our organization as far as what we are trying to achieve. Now, the big thing I'll mention here is that this takes time. Our purpose and mission, they were 10 words? Not very many words. But this took years to really understand, and took longer to really get to a point at our heart within our organization that we truly believed and were driven by these purpose, mission, and values. Okay, so we talked about being the right kind of leader. We talked about having the right vision for the future. The next piece of the puzzle is fostering an energized team, and we really believe this. If you treat your employees well, that your customers will be treated well. We have these annual meetings, and I mentioned one year, I said, looking around at our group, we're just a group of misfits. And the room got quiet all of a sudden and looked at me, and they're like, did this guy just insult us? But my intention was not to be insulting. My intention was to recognize the kind of people that we were driven and working hard to find. Because, for example, our head of IT, who leads our entire IT division, he was a security guard before working for us. But the magic behind him is that he had a degree in mathematics and was studying computer science on nights and weekends before coming to our company. He just hadn't been given a chance, but he had the raw talent and capability to handle it. Some of the staff who designed our buildings, one of the staff members was actually my waiter. And the magic behind him is that he was in school studying design, and at the end of his schooling wasn't able to continue because of a financial situation. And he was stuck being a waiter, and no one else would give him a chance, and we did. A lot of the people who actually lead major divisions at our company, one of them in particular, used to work at a big box store before coming to work for us. But she had the raw capabilities and talent to be successful in that role, and she has been phenomenal. So let's talk about a few principles. And we heard this in the last session, but I think it's super important to know what your company's organizational structure is. And in fact, we review this regularly. In fact, on Monday this week, we were talking about this again. But we want to be really crystal clear about what every role is, who reports to who, and what the responsibilities of each one of those roles are. And then we work hard to find the right people to put in each one of those seats. And this is fundamental. In fact, even when things seem to be going all right, we work hard to think about those seats and ask ourselves, really, do we have the very best person in each individual seat? Another key thing is making sure you fire the poor performers quickly. Don't keep them around. We work hard also to make it their choice. So what I mean by that is that we outline the expectations, and if you're not meeting those expectations, you'll receive feedback. And if you're still not changing your behavior, we sit down and make it really clear you need to change behavior 1, behavior 2, and behavior 3. If you don't change these 3 very specific behaviors, then you'll be let go. And some employees do a great job and make those changes, and then we're super happy. And some do not, and then it was their choice because they chose not to engage in the behavior that we needed to see. Another magical thing that happens is if you fight hard to find A players, and you get enough of them together, they start becoming self-policing. And another key point is building relationships. We meet with our employees to get feedback from them, and this is one thing I regularly hear. We want even more ways to connect and engage with other team members. And what happens here is you start building almost like a tribe, where people start not wanting to let each other down. They know that they're responsible for something, and they're going to work hard to make it happen, because otherwise their best friend sitting in the other room won't have what they need. So building those relationships becomes really valuable as well. And then we also encourage development. And the key here is to understand what the employee actually wants, and to ask them, and then to make those changes to provide them the engagement that they want to see. But I think fundamentally is that we serve our employees. They don't serve us. And so we need to hear and listen to them and to make changes based upon what they tell us. You know, one thing that we've started is this concept of cohorts. And so for everyone in our company, we mix up the staff, and it's about groups of about 15 people. And I'll actually go meet with those cohorts. We'll talk a little bit about the purpose, vision, and future of the company. And then we'll spend most of the time, an hour and a half, well, an hour of that hour and a half, letting them ask any question or say anything they want to say. And it's very open and honest, almost to a fault. In fact, they can be pointed with their questions, they can be intense, they can be really driven on how they feel. But that's super important, really, for two reasons. The first is that we all feel frustrations from time to time. And if we let those frustrations build within inside of us, that boils over and creates a bad, at least, experience for us as an employee. So giving employees a chance to communicate that is critical, because then they can release that. They can spill that out and let others, or let us know what is on their mind. But even more importantly, it helps us improve. You know, I had one employee at one of our meetings stop and say, "Hey, Mike, this is great that you listen to us, but that's not good enough. What are you actually going to do to change the problems that we see in this organization?" But I just love that. Even though it was pointed and a little bit intense, it was really good to hear, because that's exactly the truth. We need to make those changes that they're talking about. And so what we do then is we take that feedback in and we look for a couple key points on things that we're going to change over the next 6 months. We then re-engage the employees and say, this is what we're planning to do. And we execute on that. And then 6 months later, we sit down again and we talk about, did we actually achieve those? And what problems do you see now? What can we improve next? So, the first three topics were a little bit high level, but I really like to dive into concretely and specifically, what do we actually do? And so we'll talk about some of that next. Our company, Norhart, is a family business, and my parents started it about 25 years ago. And then, so I lived in the business. It was my summers as a kid growing up. It was nonstop work all the time. I went off to college, and after college, I really didn't want to join the family business. And the reason was because I didn't want people to think it was given to me. I had to work through that, my own ego in that. But I knew I wanted to take something small and grow to something much larger. So I jumped into the business because I saw the opportunity to do that. And my dad and I were able to double the size of the company in the first 4 years or so. And then my dad suddenly passed away. But what happened in that time is we really had a chance to see a lot of our weaknesses when it came to the structure and organization of our company. And I had at least enough wits about me to know that I didn't know everything, and we needed some smart people to come in and help train us and teach us what we needed to do. And so the principles I'm about to cover are things that we learned through that process and things we learned from people much smarter than us that were super successful for us to help build this organization. So there is no silver bullet to management. But if I had to say one thing that made one of the biggest impacts at our organization, it's this concept of one-on-ones. So there's this group called Manager Tools that does podcasts that are fantastic, that inspired a couple of these slides, and this is one of them. But one-on-ones for us is a half-an-hour meeting between each employee and their supervisor every single week. That may seem like a lot of time, but boy, it saves a lot of time in the long run. And so for the way I start mine off is simply by asking, how is it going? And then I'm quiet, because I want to hear what that employee has to say. It's so easy for us as managers to communicate down, but it's so hard sometimes for employees to communicate back up. So in that one-on-one, they have an opportunity to say how terrible I've been, or maybe there's something personal in their life going on, or maybe they want to discuss something in the business. Whatever they want to discuss, it's completely up to them. And then the second half is for me to share back with them any issues or things that I have going on. Now, this not only provides a mode of communication through the whole organization between employees and supervisors, but I think what it does most fundamentally is building relationships. Relationships are built with quality time, and they're built over time. And so this becomes a critical vehicle for us to build those authentic and real relationships within our organization. There is praise, which is just being positive about whatever employee is doing, like, way to go, I'm proud of you. But feedback is fundamentally different. For us, feedback is about changing future behavior. Now, there's two ways to drive down a highway. You can make an adjustment once a minute, and then you're swerving down the highway. That's not a very smooth route for anyone. And that's how many managers approach feedback. It may build up over time, and then finally you have to have a sit-down meeting to talk about that feedback, and it feels like, oh shoot, why was I told about this 6 months ago? A better way to drive down the highway is to make an adjustment once a second, because then it's a smooth path down that highway. And so for us, our goal is that every manager is providing multiple pieces of feedback per day, which is a little crazy, but it provides a lot of input to our employees, and that's what employees, at least our staff, really wants to see. Now we have a model for doing this. And the first step is simply asking whether or not that employee wants to receive the feedback. Why in the world would we do that? Well, the reason is because we want to change future behavior. So we ask them because if they're not ready to receive the feedback, there's no point in giving them that feedback. We only want to give it to them when they are ready to hear it. If they say no, we'll come back at a different time. If they say yes, then we talk about a specific behavior that employee be engaged in. Having a good attitude is not a specific and repeatable behavior. Instead, we might comment on how they're smiling, because that is a behavior. Then we talk about the result of that behavior, and then we say, way to go, keep it up, or what can you do to improve it? So it sounds like this. You start out by asking, can I give you some feedback? If they say yes, then you might say, when you arrived late to the meeting this morning, that makes me feel like you're not committed to this team. What can you do to change that? You can see how short and easy that is. It's hard to make it a habit, but once you do, it becomes a powerful vehicle and tool to providing that information that employees want to hear frequently. Another thing is meetings. When I first started my career, I had this impression from everything I heard that meetings are evil. The reality is that bad meetings are evil and good meetings are critical. And so for us, we mentioned a couple of those. We have the one-on-ones and the cohort meetings. But one other one I want to mention is the team meeting. So for each manager and their staff, there is generally a weekly or maybe twice a month meeting that they'll have with their team. Generally, that's an hour and a half long. Meetings always start on time, down to the minute. I'm a little crazy about that. And they end on time, down to the minute as well. They have a fixed agenda, so we know what we're going to get into when we get there. And for us at a leadership level, that agenda starts by simply asking, just a quick check-in. Each employee gets to say one positive personal and one positive business item. Then we look at a scorecard, kind of reviewing the key metrics of our business. And then we say, we have our quarterly goals, and they say either they're on track or off track. If they're off track, we drop that down to an issue. Then we talk about customer employee headlines, and then lastly, we go through our to-do list and either say the to-do item is either done or not done. So that's about 20 minutes. But the bulk of the time, the last hour and 10 minutes, is devoted to dealing with issues. So throughout the week, employees in that team can add items to their issues list, and they can add issues right in that meeting. And then we prioritize those issues. We pick the top 3, and then we work on one at a time. Some meetings we only get to one issue. Some meetings we get to a bunch, but we focus on the most important ones first. We look at the issue, we identify the core problem, we go through discussion points, and then we get to a solution. And the solution generally involves to-do items that get added to our to-do list from earlier that then get checked in on a next week to see if they're actually done. Another key item is our scorecard. And so for a scorecard, you imagine being on a deserted island and all you get is a single sheet of paper. What do you want that single sheet of paper to say in order for you to have a clear guide into what your business is doing that week? And so we look for leading indicators toward our business. We have about 15 of them, and we have a score for every single week. We look back the last 6 weeks, and we can immediately see what's going well and what's not, and those rough issues will get dropped down as issues that we discuss and work to solve. The challenge is making it a habit, not only with yourself, but with the whole organization. But that's not an easy process. So I like to show this graph. This is the journey of creating something great. Maybe this is starting a new business, maybe starting a new job, or starting a new project in your company. You start off and you're like, this is the best idea ever, right? It's so exciting. Doesn't take too long, and that starts to slip a little bit. You might be like, well, this is fun. And then maybe this is a little bit of work. And then there comes a moment and you're like, oh shoot, I actually have no idea what I'm doing. And then you enter this phase, this dark pit of despair. There's maybe some swearing, it's not so pretty, some tears, some long nights, not being able to sleep. And then you eventually claw your way out of it. You're like, okay, but this is still really bad. And then, and then hey, and then you get to this magical point of realizing that this is something that I'm really proud of. But I think what's important here is this red line, because everyone on the outside only sees everything above the red line. So what they see is this kind of flat notion going on, and then bang, things go really well. It's like an overnight success. But the reality is there's so much pain and challenge and hardship before that. So don't give up. Work on one item at a time. Push it forward in your organization. Understand you're going to go through lots of these pits of despair, and I've gone through more than I can count, but there is an upside. So with this, I want to share one last story. You know, at one point a few years ago, we wanted to build a stronger brand, a stronger presence, at least for our part of the country. And we started doing that in places like social media. And we were being very open and honest and exposing ourselves and what we believed on social media. And it was hard, and we weren't getting a lot of traction. In fact, I think at one point my Twitter account had, 37 followers. And that was down from 39 the week prior. So not going so well. And I had a chance to meet up with one of the top marketing executives in the Twin Cities. And I sat down and we spent a half a day together. And we walked through what we had been doing. And about halfway through the time, he's like, Mike, thanks for sharing with me all of that you're doing, but you're screwing up. You're doing everything wrong. And this is so hard to hear. This is one of those moments of like, I've been spending months and months, in fact years, trying to make this happen, and it's just not happening. He sat down with me and explained everything that we needed to do and to change in order to start turning that boat around. And I didn't want to hear it. In fact, I kind of wanted to cancel the whole initiative. I thought he was crazy. I shouldn't follow anything he's saying. We should just end this. There's no hope for what we're trying to do. But that night, it was literally that night, we took some of what he had and applied it. And we saw something happen that we had never seen before. So this is on LinkedIn, and we just posted this little post in one of the rooms. We took a picture of our team where they were helping a staff member try to do a better job. And actually, this was a staff member who hadn't been given a chance at other companies, and we were giving him a chance and training him up. And that one post blew up that night and got 225,000 views on LinkedIn. We had like 3 likes in our post prior to this. And this was the start of something really neat. And we started talking about our principles and what we believed in on LinkedIn. And that has really grown for us. And here's one of our more recent posts at 237,000 likes. That's not just views, that's likes, where the first one only had 3,000. So we've seen huge growth in that. In fact, we got to a point where LinkedIn reached out to us and said that we were one of their top 11 influencers for the platform. But I share that story because we all go through that phase where we think things are just not working. But keep at it. Keep relentlessly moving forward for months and for years, and you'll start seeing that same success. So I want to show you a couple resources that I love. Some of our thinking has come heavily from a tool called EOS. If you aren't familiar with it, I highly recommend digging into it. It's a very popular thing going on in the Midwest. There's a couple books behind it. It's a management infrastructure for how to run good companies. Another tool is manager tools. I absolutely love them. They're highly specific on the behaviors that you need to engage in as great leaders. And they have a podcast series. They're focused on the basics. I don't like that term. I call their basics really the most valuable podcasts. So I recommend listening to those. It's not a lot of time, but it's going to help you improve substantially as a manager. I also love The State of American Workplace by Gallup. And one book I've been reading recently, we read maybe 7 or 8 books a month, but one of my favorite books recently is a book called Work Rules by the head of HR of Google. And that one's been fantastic in helping us understand how to take our employee engagement to the next level. So that is everything I have. Thank you, guys.